It's Friday. You know the drill. We got the block party with JMToWin from 1 week season, followed by Bully the Sims with Youdacao. We're kicking things off here, looking at an overview of the week 3 slate. We'll then get into the top plays at each position. And finally, with JM, wrap up by building a lineup on DraftKings with some of his favorite building blocks for the slate. I'm Pete Overzet. It's DFS Friday. Let's do it.
Peter's one of the greatest depositors I've ever seen.
Trust the process. Let's go.
I got auto match with Levitan. Bullshit.
I just go the other way. In that 66, I win all the money. All the money.
If I had 150 lineups, I'd win too.
AP, close spot, bullets in your head like KD. Bust it, bitch, go bust it. And I had 10 pints with me in Russia.
Hey, everyone.
All right. Hey, everyone. Indeed. Jam, did you get a haircut? You're looking nice and fresh here today.
Yeah. You know, I was telling my barber yesterday, I don't know when I get these haircuts. You know, it's not really in the schedule at the start of the season. And realized this last week, like, oh, I'm in need of one. So I squeezed one in yesterday. And yeah, feeling good, feeling fresh, shaved, haircut, showered. So yeah, we're good to go.
You love to hear it. How did your week 3 go? Or week 2? Sorry, we're going to talk about week 3. How did your week 2 go?
Yeah, week 2 was fine. Nothing big, nothing bad. So yeah, you know, learned stuff. Didn't have any big hits and turned the page to the next week.
Yup. I had a nice lineup. I had a Jared Goff double stack that finished top 100 in the SPY Jam, but it did not have Amon-Ra St. Brown on it. I somehow built a Jared Goff stack with Laporta and Jamison Williams. So could have been an awesome day, but it was a good day nonetheless.
Yeah, we actually had one of our subs won the SPY and won a bunch of other tournaments with that Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown and some other stuff. I actually had a roster that had Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Rome Odunze, somebody else who also hit Mac Jones to make it all fit. And then it went wrong somewhere where it was like, you know, it was like finished in the top 0.5% instead of even the top 0.1%. So yeah, you know, on a weekend like that where multiple guys hit for big scores, you kind of need to get most things right. And yeah, so in the context of the week, it was a good week, but yeah, nothing major. And so ready for this week.
I know you mentioned in a previous week, and you guys are now doing some stuff with Sims over at 1 week season. Has your process changed at all for building lineups? I know you're always kind of incorporating in, even last year with the Bink machine, that kind of was evolving, but like, how is your process different this year?
Yeah, I would say it's different, maybe not dramatically, but semi-dramatically. So the actual process, the first 90% of the process hasn't changed much. But what I like to do is, so people who are on the site, they know, like, I use the Bink machine, the optimizer, as if I'm hand building 150 lineups. And so it goes so far as an optimizer is designed to optimize your output. So it will override your prescribed ownership to maximize your projected points. And so there's even a setting in the Bink machine on the site for users. They can use JM's defaults. And those defaults are every player is just projected for 4x their salary. So if 7K, he's projected for 28 points. If he's 4K, he's projected for 16 points. And what that does is it overrides the optimizer's tendency to optimize your lineup for projected points, and it has to then fall back on your prescribed ownership for these players. So I can set my prescribed ownership and then all my rules, and I have essentially 150 rosters that look like what I would hand build them to look like. But what I've been able to do with the Sims is then I've probably built 1,500 rosters, 2,000 rosters last week, and then continue shopping through them and pulling out ones that I like throughout the week. And then at the end, you know, as we get to Saturday night, Sunday morning, run the Sims and then sort through those to see which ones have the highest ROI. And so I had probably 20 of my 150 rosters had negative ROI because it was like, okay, the Sims aren't seeing this or the projections aren't seeing this, but I see this angle, right? Yeah. And so some of those rosters that I pulled in from the bottom where it was like, okay, I want these rosters. But then other ones, it was like, you know, of my Dak Prescott rosters or of my Mac Jones rosters, you know, those are my 2 highest owned quarterbacks last week. It's like, of these, which ones have the highest ROI expectation? And then for the most part, just take those ones. So yeah, it's basically allowed me to multiply my time, which has been really cool because I'm able to then say, okay, instead of just building 150 and spending all my time toward that, I'm able to shop through, set a bunch aside, and then really sort through those more effectively. So, and one of the things too that I think is cool, you know, about the Sims is, you know, at least on our end, and I, you know, Run the Sims has a great product. The Solver has a great product. So this isn't just about us, but for if you're an OWS user, you already use the Bink machine. We have a single lineup sims is just $20 a month. And so if you're a single entry 3 max, you can add that in. It's $5 a week, right? And even if you're playing a couple $100 a week, there's a 50 lineup sims that's $50 a month. And so when you break that down by week, you realize you're really not adding that much to your fees, but you're significantly multiplying your time, kind of the power of your time. So yeah, it's been cool for me to mess around with that and incorporate that into my process. I think it's been really, really valuable so far.
Yeah, and I imagine too that it frees you up to do more research on the games, on the players. If you know, like, hey, I'm not going to have to spend, 10 hours building lineups like we did, pre-sims and all of that.
Yeah, and or the amount of time that I spent previously, the process I had previously for selecting the lineups that I would use, it's massively simplified that, which is a big deal as well for me.
All right. Well, let's dive in to this week 3 slate here. Kind of similar to last week in that we really only have one kind of marquee game with a total over 50. That is, of course, that Bears and Cowboys game here. The chat is already worried that we are going to talk about a chalky popular game. Please no Bears and Cowboys. Unfortunately, we will be discussing it. And then, a bunch of other games that are kind of just in that typical, 40 to 45 range. What are you seeing kind of overall on this slate?
Well, the Bears and Cowboys game, the reason why people are maybe hoping we don't go chalky and talk about it is because it's the best game on the slate. So I think it's interesting to obviously focus on the ways in which that game could fail. The Cowboys and Giants game was like 13-10 halfway through the third quarter. The Cowboys are not playing an inherently aggressive brand of offensive football. And actually, Javonte Williams actually looks good. And this Cowboys run blocking scheme has looked good. They're going to start out this game keeping the ball on the ground and kind of having this balanced offense. It's not like the Cowboys are just coming out and bombs away trying to score as many points as they can. So very, very much to me, this game is going to require Caleb Williams and the Bears to have things clicking in order to really push this game, propel this game forward. So there's this is not a have to play it type of game, even though it's the only game on the slate that's sort of on that top tier of games. There's a very clear scenario in which this game down, something else wins. The difficulty on a week like this is there's not a clear game that has a good shot at shooting out. So we could have one of those weeks where there is no shootout, right? But there are some potential options there. And then just in terms of this Bears offense, so Caleb Williams has not looked quite right, but Ben Johnson knows Matt Eberflus's defense really well. The Bears players know Matt Eberflus's defense really well. And I think this is critical to think about. There's two different types of defenses. There's system defenses, and then there are coaches like Lou Anarumo or Brian Flores who are going to throw something different at the opposing offense each week. Well, a system defense, like the Cowboys basically have run zone, I think last week, all but 2 plays, something like that, right? A system defense, it all has rules. So in other words, this player is keying on this guy on the offense. And if this guy on the offense does this, then this player's responsibility is this. If this guy on the offense does this, this player's responsibility is that. And so a coach like Kevin O'Connell, a coach like Kyle Shanahan, they understand the rules of these defenses really well and how to manipulate them. So it's like, okay, this guy watching this player on our offense, if we do this, this defender is going to react this way, but this opens up this space of the field so we can build a play off of that to attack this weakness, right, of the rules of this defense. So between Ben Johnson and the Bears players knowing Matt Eberflus so well, knowing his system, knowing the rules of that system so well, I do think Ben Johnson's going to have a great game plan here for attacking this Cowboys defense. So the question is just, does Caleb Williams execute the game plan? Are they able to pull this together? And if so, this game can play to the upside. But there are very clear paths to the downside, very different ways to play this slate. So yeah, I'm excited to dive in and kind of see what else there is on this slate.
One thing we haven't really talked about yet on the shows this year is, late swap. Obviously, when people are worried about a chalky game, it is the late game, right? So if you have some unique pieces early, that can give you kind of a green light, yellow light, red light of, hey, can I load into this game because all my early pieces hit? I just want to play the best plays. Or, hey, I'm pretty behind. A lot of my stuff didn't hit. Maybe I shouldn't play, what we envision being pretty chalky. But do you kind of build any of your rosters with kind of that late swap flexibility in mind?
Well, I think one of the best ways to do that is to build doubles of rosters. I remember one week, Brandon Adams had a duplicate roster that finished like 3rd or 4th in the Millie Maker. And it was because he would build 75 rosters for his 150 and then just put them all in, and anything that looked live coming up toward the end of the early games, he would make changes on those rosters. The other ones he wouldn't worry about He just happened to have a week where he had a roster that didn't look live, and it ended up becoming live down the stretch in the second games. So I think that's a way to do it, is even if you're building 10 rosters, you could build 5 rosters and just have duplicates and then give yourself that flexibility in the late window. Or you could have very specific concepts and rules around, okay, if things play out this way, this is what I'm going to do. I think it's smart to have a plan in place beforehand of what you're looking for. So you're not just trying to react in that condensed window, because that leads to a lot of second guessing. That leads to a lot of fear of failure. Whereas if you can have a plan in place beforehand, then it just comes down to, okay, things played out this way in the early window. Therefore, I'm going to make these changes that I already knew I was going to make. And that makes things a little bit easier.
If you had to circle one other game that you think could challenge Bears and Cowboys for game of the week or really get nutty from a scoring perspective, which one would be on your radar?
One of the games that stands out to me in this regard is Colts and Titans. And it comes down to both good defenses and then a really conservative offense on Tennessee. But if this game can play out a certain way to where Indy is doing well early, which they certainly can against this defense, then that could compel Tennessee to come back. And if you've watched these Tennessee offenses, it's this yin and yang where Callahan's calling this really conservative offense, and then Cam Ward is being really aggressive. And so things could tilt toward that aggressiveness side to where this game becomes one of those, kind of like the Steelers and Jets in week 1, where you look at it and you're like, I just don't see how this game shoots out. But then if you really broaden your imagination and you say, yeah, but how could it shoot out? This is one of those games where it wouldn't be really all that surprising to see like a 34-31 type game when it's all said and done. That's not the likeliest outcome, but it's one of these spots where combining how few people are likely to play that scenario and what it could look like if it plays out that way, it's one of these spots that's plus EV, right? It would make us money if we could play out the slate 100 times.
Well, I'm sure we'll get into some of the players from these games as we start to go position by position. And let's head to quarterback right now. And I think the big story, this week at the quarterback position is all of the backup quarterbacks that we have starting. Obviously, no Joe Burrow, so we're getting getting Browning there. We're not getting JJ McCarthy, so you have Carson Wentz. So let's start with the 2 quarterbacks who are priced at 4K. And it looks like Jaden Daniels. Was he officially ruled out, JM?
No, but he wasn't seen in practice this morning was the last I saw.
Okay.
So it seems, I think we're seeing Marcus Mariota this week.
Yeah, so let's start there just because those are the 4K punts. We obviously had the Mac Jones punt last week that kind of got home, paid off his salary, I would say, at 4K. But how are you thinking about Carson Wentz and Marcus Mariota at 4K?
Yeah, so if not for the Jared Goff game last week, Mac Jones is probably the tournament winner. You put up 22 points at 4K, and the deeper into the week we got, and one of the things that's cool about me doing this journal now in Discord is Inner Circle members can see my thoughts develop throughout the week. And so there was a point in the week where I was heavy on Jalen Hurts, and by the time we got to the end of the weekend, he was like 5% of my pool. And I ended up with Mac Jones, by far my highest owned quarterback. And the thinking was he's actually pretty good, and it should be a really good fit for this system in this really good offense. And he's so cheap that if you don't think anybody's going to put the slate away, that's just the best way to go, right? So the tough thing about these cheap guys this week is you have to put them in the context of that Bears-Cowboys game. Caleb Williams is only 5,600. Dak Prescott's only 5,900. So you're not saving that much. So you do have to play toward a scenario in which those guys are not hitting. So that doesn't mean that you have to put Javonte Williams, for example, on a Carson Wentz roster. But I do think you have to think about what story am I telling in that game over there, right? Do I actually think that game underwhelms? That said, so Carson Wentz to me falls in the same bucket as Mac Jones last week. Realistically, Carson Wentz at this point in his career is almost certainly a better quarterback than JJ McCarthy at this point in his career. And that's not saying much because JJ McCarthy has genuinely looked really bad. He looks like he's playing on 0.75x speed in terms of his processing and then the speed at which he's getting the ball out. It has looked bad for all but one quarter of the season. But Carson Wentz, I think, is a guy, especially in this quarterback whisperer offense, in this matchup, he's a guy who, if the Bengals can keep this competitive, I think Carson Wentz could easily put up one of these. He's put up 25.9 or more points in 4 of his last 9 starts. 2 of those games are 31 plus points. And so Carson Wentz is capable of going out there and putting up points. And he's going to throw the ball downfield, which we like in this offense because guys are open downfield in this offense. So Carson Wentz, I like. Marcus Mariota, we know that he can also go out there and he can pick up yards on the ground. He's going to be somewhat conservative through the air, and this offense has been pretty conservative, not much downfield passing. So I don't think that we have as many opportunities for upside here, but it wouldn't shock me if he ends up with, 40 or 50 rushing yards and gets 1 or 2 rushing scores, and all of a sudden he's a difference maker on this slate. So I'm not as interested in Mariota because with Wentz, I can see the structure of the offense changing from what it's been so far, but going back to what we've seen in this Vikings Kevin O'Connell offense, where it's mostly about intermediate and downfield passing. And how are we getting guys open 12, 15, 18, 20 yards down the field? Whereas the Commanders, they're probably not going to change structurally, and their structure has been, all right, how do we just keep marching the field with these short area throws? So harder for Mariota to have that high end upside, but because of the rushing, again, Wentz will run around too, but because of the rushing, Mariota certainly can be considered this week because it's not outside the realm of possibilities. He has one of those games where he gets the yards, gets the touchdowns.
Yeah, and thank you to the chat for confirming. I guess right before we're getting ready to go live, they did announce Jane Daniels for sure ruled out. So we are getting Marcus Mariota here at 4K. One thing too, when we were talking about some of games being popular, guys being chalky, looking at early ownership projections, even Caleb Williams and Dak, who I want to talk about now, neither of them are projecting for outsized ownership. I'm saying 12, 13%, 7, 8%. So this isn't one of those spots. I know last year we'd have times where our quarterback would be 25%, 30% on a third of rosters. That's just not what we're looking at. So if you like a spot, I wouldn't be shying away from it because of quarterback ownership. But yeah, let's talk about Caleb Williams and Dak, because I do think if people aren't kind of going that cheap route, those are the guys they're going to want to play. Right.
Yeah. So Caleb Williams is very interesting because his tools pop, right? He's so dynamic. He's faster than you think he'd be. The ball comes out faster than you think. There's more zip on it than you think. Everything's there. I forget who it was, but somebody said it reminds him of early career Josh Allen, where it's you can see where it can go. Now, Josh Allen, the trajectory he went on was rare, and the steps that he took were rare. Not every player is going to be able to do that. But the point is, there is a timeline on which Caleb Williams becomes elite because he has the tools to do that. And it's all about the processing and the between the ears and all that. And so, and the accuracy on some of these throws where he just misses clear throws. But yeah, I really do I don't know that maybe I've played Caleb Williams before, but I've played very little Caleb Williams. If I play 20% Caleb Williams this week, that might add up to that might be more than my cumulative ownership of Caleb Williams over his career. But this is the spot where I just think it's a really good spot for this Bears offense. And it makes a lot of sense in the context of this slate as well. So again, my caution is I don't think that this is some and I said the number 20%, right? That's probably where I'm going to end up on him, and maybe 20% Dak and 20% Wentz, and then kind of a mix and match from there. But that also means a lot of my single entry 3-max would be focused on these guys. And so I do see a clear pathway in which this game plays to the downside, or is just sort of this 24 to 21 game and it doesn't produce much. But in terms of where we could have a score that you had to have against the price tag, this one just makes a lot of sense. I mean, Adunze is so cheap. DJ Moore is so cheap. So the thing is, last week, we talked about Burrow and his wideouts. It's they have to hit at such a high-end score to put the slate away because they cost so much of your salary cap. Whereas in this situation, Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, whatever combo hits, it can hit at such a low price tag that if it really hits, you're in trouble if you don't have it. And so I just see the potential for things to play out that way. I also think we get so fixated on quarterback and sometimes don't realize, hey, you can have lots of different quarterbacks at the tops of the leaderboards on a given week, right? And so this isn't the one decision that's going to make or break your roster. And this is a spot where I don't mind going kind of with the field a little bit. Even if Caleb Williams is 20% owned, whatever stack you have is going to be the exact stack you have might be 5%, 6% owned. And so if you're on the stack that hits, you're still in that top 5 or 6% of the field, and then you're competing against far fewer people for first place. So I mean, I just like this spot this week. And like I said, I'll be poking around in other spots. I'll be playing some other spots, but I do think this is kind of a head and shoulders above the other games type of setup this week.
You mentioned having some interest in that Colts and Titans game. Daniel Jones, who I think is second in overall quarterback scoring behind only Lamar Jackson so far, he's still only 5,400, playing at a pretty high level there. Do you have any interest in him at that price?
Yeah, so I'm going to have some stacks of this game probably tilted toward Daniel Jones, but with a little bit of Cam Ward as well. So, we look at the scoring. There's 3 rushing touchdowns. That's not sustainable. But he also has 318 passing or 316 passing yards, 272. So like he's putting up the passing yards too that sort of back up this type of production. And so I like this spot for Daniel Jones. I like this spot for Cam Ward. Like I said, the Tennessee Titans have a good defense, right? I mean, the Titans were beating the Rams at halftime, and then Sean McVay's always able to kind of figure out what he needs to do in order to beat that defense, which he was able to do in the second half. But the Titans have a good defense. They played the Broncos close. They played the Rams close. And I think that they'll play the Colts close. So the question is, do they play them close in a game where points are being scored, or is it just sort of both defenses taking over? I think both defenses kind of taking over is the likelier scenario. But in terms of what could break the slate, this is one of those that just looks like, okay, there are ways that this could play out. Division game, teams have downfield components. This could certainly play out that way. I would like to probably have Alec Ayo-Maynor on most of those rosters because of that downfield component. Like what's going to break this game open, something from him, maybe Alec Pierce on some of these rosters. But yeah, I like the passing attacks here for large field play, and I might have a little bit on tighter builds as well.
It's kind of a weak slate for quarterbacks up top. Obviously, no Jaden Daniels. We don't have Josh Allen on this slate. We have Jalen Hurts. That team is playing very boring, unfriendly fantasy games right now. Baker Mayfield, offensive line issues. Jordan Love, are they going to get pushed? Justin Herbert against the Broncos. Anything up here on the high end interest you?
Yeah, you kind of define my thoughts on Hurts. I'm less concerned about the boring nature of their offense, because I think that's something that can change on a dime, right? It's early in the season and you're sort of figuring things out. So they could come out and suddenly be more aggressive, but they're also facing one of the absolute best defenses in the NFL. And so I don't see this as a spot where Hurts is likely to put up a game you literally had to have. And then on top of all that, as we've talked about, the math doesn't make as much sense with him because you don't usually get the stacking partner. 3 out of 5 offensive linemen injured for the Bucs, and that starts to really matter at that point. So harder to see, especially in a game where I don't think the Jets are pushing Tampa. I think that they'll do well, but I don't think they're pushing Tampa. So harder to see him putting up the score you had to have. And Love against Cleveland, hard to see Cleveland pushing the Packers in this game, a low volume passing attack. Herbert is interesting. Herbert, this Chargers and Broncos game falls into the same category for me as the Titans and Colts game, where you say the likeliest scenario is for it to be lower. So we can pile in the Texans and the Jags in this discussion too. All 3 of these games, it's like the likeliest outcome is for this to be moderate scoring, low scoring, but there are pathways to this becoming a higher scoring game. And so for something like that, I don't necessarily want it in a single entry contest with 300 entries or 800 entries or something like that. But I do want to have it in some MME. And then I might say, let me pull some of that into, a single entry, like a $27 single entry where you're competing against several thousand rosters. And most people won't be on this type of play. And so, I do think that this is the type of game where I don't necessarily want to isolate one-offs because I don't expect this to be higher scoring. And then I'm guessing on which one-off would hit on top of that, right? So the math doesn't make a lot of sense to me there. But it's a game where it's like, okay, but I could see this being 34-31. Bo Nix is aggressive. He's going to run around. He's going to try to make plays. Justin Herbert can throw the ball downfield. Both teams have good weapons. And so, yes, both defenses are tremendous, but also both offenses have some tremendous components. And so those are the types of spots where I want to think about how could things break funny, especially on a week like this, where, as we've said, Cowboys and Bears is very clearly head and shoulders above the other games, but there are clear paths to it disappointing. So what happens if just one other unlikely game shoots out, and where could those unlikely games be? So I see all 3 of those that I just mentioned as sort of being in that pile of not super likely to shoot out, but worth at least considering some stacks of those games.
Nice. Yeah. And then, this, like last week too, this is a pretty deep quarterback pool. There's so many of these quarterbacks here in the 5K range. Just want to give you an opportunity. If there's any other guys in here you would, throw darts on, could we see Texans, Jags get fun? Drake May at home, he showcased a pretty good skill set there against the Dolphins. Anything jump out to you that you want to mention before we move to running back?
Plenty of guys in here that I think can go for, 18, 20, 22 points. Drake May's in that bucket. I think the place that I would want to highlight is Mac Jones, just because you can just say 49ers quarterback who can competently run this system always has a chance to put up 25, 26 DraftKings points. And so Mac Jones is a 49ers quarterback who can competently run this system. And the Superdome's not an easy place to play, and that Saints team has been playing well. So they're not just a pushover where you look in the box score and you're like, well, yeah, I was against the Saints. Cardinals are going to throw a lot schematically at the 49ers, but as long as they're able to figure that out, then they have a shot at doing really well here because there is still a talent gap between the 49ers offense and the Cardinals defense.
All right. I see some questions in the chat, some good stuff. We'll hit on those as we get to the specific skill positions as we move on, but let's head over to the running back position this week. We can start with what is going to be maybe the chalkiest player through 3 weeks of DFS in Jordan Mason. Obviously, Aaron Jones ruled out. Jordan Mason has this friendly price tag at 5,400 at home versus this Bengals run defense. Where are you at on Jordan Mason?
Yeah, I mean, this seems pretty fragile for, backup stepping in, so we all have to play him. He's not going to catch a ton of passes, so you're hoping for, and he's not going to get a lot of schemed passing work, which is more important, right? Catching 2 or 3 passes is great, but if it's 2 or 3 passes for 8 yards or something like that, it's not helping us a ton. So yeah, I mean, I think we're betting on, does he get the yards? Does he get the touchdowns? If he does, you get your 20, 22, 23 points. If he doesn't, you might have 80 yards on the ground. You might have 2-3 points through the air and no touchdowns. All of a sudden, you're sitting with a huge chunk of the field on 11 or 12 points. So I try not to think too much about, especially at this point in the week, I try not to think too much about what everybody else is going to be doing. And when I don't think about what everybody else is going to be doing, and I just think about what plays stand out to me, Jordan Mason doesn't stand out to me. So he's in this sort of second tier for me of, I mean, honestly, what this does is it makes me like Wentz more, right? If everybody likes Jordan Mason, you need the touchdowns in order for a player to be useful. So realistically, what we should always say with the running back is, can they get 100 yards and 2 touchdowns? Well, what if he gets 90 yards and no touchdowns, but those touchdowns are coming in a different way, right? And so the leverage there, for any of you who aren't familiar with this type of thinking, so much of DFS is strategy. So is Mason likelier than Wentz to have a big game? Probably. But in terms of how much more likely versus how big the delta in ownership is going to be, well, then you think about, if Wentz is getting these touchdowns, Jordan Mason almost certainly isn't. So every time Wentz scores, you're not only helping your rosters, but you're hurting a large chunk of the field. And that's the strategy there of having that leverage over a bunch of rosters. So yeah, the Mason popularity is going to push me toward Wentz. I think it's a thin running back pool this week. So Mason is sort of in my top 6, not in my top 3 or 4. And so I'm going to have exposure to him, but I'll almost certainly be lower than the field, right? So I might just say, based on how I would want to build, independent of what everybody else is doing, I might want 8% Jordan Mason or something like that, right? And then the field might come in at 30%. It's like, okay, well, if Mason puts up 25 points, I am getting some of these points, right? I still have rosters that can compete. And then if he doesn't, then 92% of my rosters are in good shape. And that's probably how I will attack this week.
Yeah. So beyond Jordan Mason, we once again kind of have most of the best options are the most expensive options here. Just at the top by salary, Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson in an awesome matchup. We can always include Barkley in there. Jonathan Taylor playing out of his mind right now. Bucky Irving would probably even be catching a little bit more interest had he punched in that touchdown that Rachaad White vultured. But what do you think at the high end here for the running back position?
Yeah, so I think that these top 3 guys are in a different tier than the other guys. Bucky Irving, like when you sort of tally up the stats of what would be required for him to post 30 points at his price tag, which we would ideally want, it's hard to see the paths to that. And you realize he really hasn't done it much, and so, and they're going to keep involving Rachaad White. It's early in the season. It's not the end of last year where it was like, all right, let's just have Bucky take over because, it's the end of the season. Like they still have to think about health for the whole season here. And so I think that there's some guys up, below these top 3 who are attractive, right? Jonathan Taylor can always hit for a big game. It's funny. I had a ton of Jonathan Taylor in week 1, very little of him in week 2. And that's kind of the game we play in DFS sometimes. You just aren't on the right week on the right player, but we know that he can always hit. Chase Brown's role is big enough that he can hit. Ashton Genty will eventually hit, but once we get below these top 3 guys, you're taking on a lot more guesswork. Bijan Robinson is on a streak of, I'd have to go back and look, but I think down the stretch last year, he had 9 out of his last 12 games were like 20 plus DraftKings points, and then he's done it again to start the season. So, last year he had like 109 total yards and 173 total yards against the Panthers, something like that. And Tyler Algier had like 108 total yards and then like 60 something total yards, right? And last year we kept talking all season, the Panthers were so bad that backup running backs, number 2 running backs, were often outscoring number 1 running backs, right? So that's the one concern here. But with Derek Brown back, I do think this Panthers run defense is better. They got blown out on the ground in week 1. They did well in week 2. And then I think that this team can be competitive. So I like Bijan Robinson here. I've had to retrain my brain on how to say his name once again. So Bijan is, does he get the 30 plus points? I don't think we're super likely to get that, but I think when we can stack in these guys where it's like they're not going to miss and they still have that ceiling, that can be pretty critical. And Christian McCaffrey, same type of thing. You know that the workload is going to be there. You know the opportunity is going to be there. And then Saquon, I'm such a matchup guy at running back that against a tremendous defense, my instinct is just be like, just stay away from the running back. But you go back to last year in both games against the Rams, he put up, I actually don't know what it is in DraftKings points, but it was well over 30 DraftKings points in both games. One of them was over 40. He handled this Rams defense. Now, obviously, this Rams defense is going to come back and say, how do we stop Saquon Barkley? This passing attack hasn't looked right. Let's force them to win through the air. But there is the possibility there for Saquon to have a huge game here, like an actual difference-making, had-to-have-it type game. And to me, like, we go over to high-priced wide receivers. We don't have to move there in our discussion yet, but just when we think about what's there, there's not a lot where you say, oh my gosh, I have to have, Puka's going against the Eagles. Is he going to put up a score that you had to have? Jamar Chase is going against the Vikings with Jake Browning. Justin Jefferson has Carson Wentz. And so you kind of start going down this list and it's like, yeah, like we can save money at quarterback. There's plenty of places to save money at wide receiver. I don't mind. Like a lot of my practice builds in the Bink machine last night were Saquon plus Bijan or Bijan plus CMC or CMC plus Saquon. Like a lot of these had 2 of these running backs. And because of the nature of the way salary works, I had one roster in particular that had both those guys or 2 of these high price running backs and Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb. And like, I still liked the other pieces on that roster, so I think that the salary is plentiful enough this week that I don't mind just going up at the running back position.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a lot of these guys are values, even relative to the higher salaries, just for what you're getting from them. But if we were trying to save a little money, where would we be going? You mentioned Javonte Williams looking better than I think anyone expected through 2 games. We could also just toss DeAndre Swift because he's part of that game environment. Anything of interest with those 2?
Yeah, absolutely. So those are 2 of the kind of 6 guys that I'm looking at. And it's just in terms of where do we bet on a game environment? Where do we find a game environment that we like, where we expect points to be scored, and then not try to get too fine with it of like, yeah, we're going to look at it and say, oh, it's going to be high scoring, go to the passing attacks, go to the quarterbacks. But what we're really saying is we think there are going to be touchdowns. And so it feels gross to play Javonte Williams. I think, especially at this point in the season, I always like to think in terms of, like last week, it was pretty tough at the wide receiver position. So I made a list in the player grid of here are the wide receivers who are going to be priced higher later in the year. And I put the price tag I expected them to eventually get to and what their price tag was last week, right? And on that list was JSN. On that list was Teteroa McMillan. On that list was Roma Dunze. On that list was like 1 or 2 other guys who hit for big games, right? And so you just said, who are the underpriced wide receivers? Who are the guys going to be priced 1K or higher later in the season? And just play those guys, right? We can simplify things sometimes that way. So the one thing I don't like about Javonte Williams is we're at this point in the season where there's still players who fall into that bucket, and Javonte Williams doesn't. Like 6,100 is pretty fair value for him.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this is a game environment in which he can justify that price tag. He can go for 20, 22 points. And I don't like, if we zoom out, I don't think this is a slate where we're likely to see 225 point shipping tournaments. And that can always change. All it takes is one high-owned player putting up a monster game, and it skews all of that upward. But if we played out the slate 100 times, I think the typical winning score is going to be under 200 in a lot of tournaments. And so just getting like the 20, 22 points from Javonte Williams can have a lot of value. And yeah, I think the quicker we can adjust to the way players look. People fell in love with Javonte Williams in the DFS community and the fantasy community, and I was never super high on him. And then after he had it wasn't just an ACL tear, right? It was like a significant knee injury. And when he came back, everyone was excited. It's like, oh, let's play Javonte Williams, who had a couple big games, but has never really been what we thought he was going to be. And then like everyone soured on him, and they've soured on him so far that it's like a joke. Like they can't even imagine Javonte Williams being useful or good, right? They've swung so far the other way. Whereas the truth is, in most cases, somewhere in the middle. And the truth right now is he looks better than expected. This rushing attack looks better than expected. Maybe the burst isn't totally there, but he's really difficult to bring down. He has good vision. He's working with his offensive line well. And so, I've watched all 32 games of this season so far. And like Javonte Williams and this Cowboys rushing attack, I'm always looking for things that kind of stand out, right? Where it's like, oh, this looks different than expected, or different than that's where the JJ McCarthy thing was. It's like, you literally look like you're watching the player on a different speed than the other 31 quarterbacks you're watching. Javonte Williams literally looks like kind of in the top half of running backs in the league right now. So, I think Javonte Williams, DeAndre Swift, his workload kind of came down last week. He played 80% of the snaps in week 1. That came down significantly last week. Kyle Monangai got more work, but I want to go back and watch that game and see what point in the game that really shifted, because I didn't pay attention to that, of like whether that shifted from the start or as they fell behind in that game. And so, I think DeAndre Swift is very much in play here, as is our guy, Javonte Williams.
I'm trying to think of if there's any other value guys who are worth talking about. Jaylen Warren got some positive speak. I was going to say coach speak, but I actually think it was Aaron Rodgers. And then Kenny Gainwell got a little phased out there. Anything down here cheap outside of Mason, maybe pivots off of the Mason price range?
I think people will go to Kenneth Walker. So I just want to, because it looks like Charbonnet might not play this week.
A little banged up, yeah.
If that happens, I do just want to shout out that Kenneth Walker, another one of these guys that the DFS community just fell in love with, because there was one week where he had a monster game at high ownership. Kenneth Walker has 43 career games. Do you want to know how many times he scored more than 23.3 DraftKings points? 4 times. Four times in 43 career games, he's scored more than 23.3 DraftKings points. So, he's not the player everybody thinks he is, but he is capable of he had that. Remember that game where he had that huge run? It was like in overtime, or it was right at the end of the game to send it to overtime. I think it was against the Raiders, and it was like everybody was rostering him that week, and he put up like 30-something points. And ever since then, people are like, Kenneth Walker, yes, like the ceiling. It doesn't show up very often. So I want to shout that out. Travis Etienne has looked really good. The Jags rushing attack, unsurprisingly, with Liam Cohen scheming it up, and not just scheming it up, but calling the plays and sort of the rhythm of how he calls them. That rushing attack looks really good. I don't like taking running backs against Houston, but I think that Etienne can do well here. And then, beyond that, I think we're kind of betting on workload. And so there are plenty of guys down here that you can make a case for, just not a strong case, right? Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Jaylen Warren, Tony Pollard, like any of these guys can have a nice game. It's just not super likely. And so I might have bits and pieces of those guys, but they won't be focuses for me.
Yep. Kind of a similar pattern that we've had here, where it just kind of shapes up to paying up at the running back position, especially with how much value there tends to be at quarterback and tight end. So
I just want to say, like, a lot of times people don't double pay up at running back. That's just not that's not a tendency that people have. And so what we'll see is a lot of single pay up, and then, with Jordan Mason or however people structure it.
Right.
And so what you think about there is CMC might be, let's just throw numbers out there. CMC might be 20% owned, 25% owned. Bijan might be 25% owned. Saquon might be 15% owned. But Bijan and CMC together will be far lower owned. So if both guys go for 30 points and you needed those scores in order to win, most people won't be getting both of those scores. So even though they're going to be high owned individually, you can still say, okay, but I'm getting a combination of players. It's going to be low owned, and that can make a difference as well.
Yep. That's a good shout there. Let's head over to wide receiver. Always so much to unpack here with such a deep player pool. We could start with some of the guys in that game. I do think Rome Odunze, his price plus this matchup, plus coming off of a monster game, 2 weeks of awesome usage, he's going to be very popular. People are also very on board with JSN role at this point. He's yet to find the end zone, but back-to-back games with 10 plus targets there. Puka, of course, you mentioned him, always in play. Those are kind of the popular guys I'm seeing, and then it's pretty flat from there. Where do you want to start at the wide receiver position?
Yeah, I mean, I think that let's start at Rome Odunze. I don't think people are wrong on him. I think last week when I was laying out salary, he was 4,800 last week, and I was laying out salaries where I expected guys to be priced later in the year. I think I put him at like 6.2K or 6.5K.
Yeah, I remember that.
If this usage keeps up, like he could go higher than that, right? But that's fair value for him. And now he's 5,300 in a great matchup. And it is a great matchup. I think that's important to throw out there because sometimes early in the season, box scores tell a different story than what we're actually seeing on the field, right? Where it's like, oh, but yeah, the Cowboys gave a bunch of yards, but it's because of like these two plays where there was miscommunication and therefore like these guys got open. That's not going to happen every week. They're going to clean this up. Trayvon Diggs doesn't look healthy. And also Trayvon Diggs doesn't have Michael Parsons like forcing the quarterback to throw the ball. Like we're seeing what the Packers are doing with their corners, right? Where they're playing tight, they're attacking the ball because they know that they can. They know that the quarterback's going to be under pressure and have to get the ball out quickly. Trayvon Diggs has never been this great cover corner. He's been a guy who was a ball hawk and could attack and pick off passes and all that. So add to the fact that he doesn't look healthy. Kaiir Elam, who cast off from the Bills in spite of being a first-round pick for them, Christian Benford took that job away from him his rookie year as a sixth-round pick, right? And so Kaiir Elam has never found his footing in the NFL. He's starting on the other side, and it's a great spot for the Bears. And then on top of that, there's no real pass rush from the Cowboys, and so there's time for plays to develop downfield, not just on the perimeter, but over the middle as well. So, yeah, I think Rome Odunze, like, can he miss? Obviously, he's a wide receiver. There's a lot of volatility at wide receiver, but he's a tremendous play. And then because Rome Odunze is so obviously a tremendous play, and DJ Moore is in that same offense with equal talent level, yes, he and Caleb Williams have never fully meshed and clicked going back to last year, but he's still going to have some games this year where he puts up 25 to 30 DraftKings points. And so a week where most people are on Odunze is a good week, leverage-wise, strategy-wise, to also pull in maybe not equal DJ Moore to Odunze exposure, but like pretty close. Like you could say, yes, Odunze will outscore DJ Moore more often in this spot, but when DJ Moore outscores Odunze, you actually make a lot more money because fewer people will be on him. And so there's a case to be made for, like, if I'm 30% Odunze, I might be 25% DJ Moore. And I'll look at those DJ Moore rosters and go, oh, I don't like this one as much. But that's kind of the point, it's like other people won't like that one as much either. And so you want to get that in play. So really like that spot. JSN, I think JSN is this is an interesting one because New Orleans has looked like there's a thin line this year between the bad teams and the good teams. There's a huge middle class in the NFL this year. So the Titans, the Saints, even the Giants, like I don't think people realize the Giants were the better team than the Cowboys for most of that game. Like the Giants could be 1-1 and the Cowboys 0-2, and then the Cowboys are the ones that people obviously we know. Oh, the Cowboys had a 64-yarder, sent it to overtime, all that, right? But like the Giants actually looked better throughout that game than the Cowboys. The Cowboys just ended up winning. So my point is the Saints are one of the worst teams in the NFL, but they're not bad. Like they're kind of a little bit below the pack. They've played really well, but both those games were at home, where they didn't have to deal with the crowd noise and they were running this hurry up, a lot of no huddle. And it's like, how is that going to play in Seattle where Spencer Rattler can't hear anything and they're trying to communicate? So I could see Seattle kind of running away with this game, which makes it less likely that JSN gets a ton of targets. At the same time, New Orleans has played really well. They've played these games close against good teams. And so if they're able to do that here, I think JSN is very much in play. And then Puka is one of these where, he's justified his price tag once in the last, going back to last year, once since the start of last season, and it was that 42-44 shootout against the Bills. But he's also always scoring in the high teens, the low 20s, and it just takes one play for him to bounce up above that. So he's not like a staple for me, but he's very much fine for me this week.
Lots of conversation in the chat right now about the Chargers wide receivers. Earlier in the week, Ladd McConkey was questionable, I think, dealing with that biceps injury. I believe he was back at practice yesterday, but a lot of talk about Keenan Allen at 4,700. Quentin Johnston continues to score touchdowns at what I would say is a unsustainable clip. Any thoughts on the Chargers here? You did mention liking Herbert a bit.
Yeah, I mean, Keenan Allen's also scoring touchdowns at an unsustainable clip, right? One in each game. He's not getting the double-digit targets. He's getting, 7, 6, 7, 8 targets, whatever it is, and converting those into catches and some short area yards. So if you get 5 catches for 51 or 7 for 68, like that's not going to play as well in tournaments as it does when he gets the touchdown. At the same time, I was actually looking at Keenan Allen last night and thinking about how much he hates the Broncos. Like he's been very vocal about it throughout his career of just despising the Broncos. And yeah, it does seem like a spot where competitive game, they're going to have to throw a lot of short area catches. So I think that you get a nice floor from Keenan Allen. I think you're highly likely to get double-digit points. At 4,700, that's nice. His chances of being a player that we flip the cards over on Sunday evening and him being a player that people who didn't roster were like, God, I didn't roster Keenan Allen. That's why I lost this week. I think the chances of that are pretty low. But yeah, I'm fine with him. Like, I think going out of your way to attack this Broncos defense with wideouts is usually a losing mission. But yeah, like Quentin Johnston could score, Keenan Allen could score. One of these guys could put up 20, 22 points. Ladd McConkey is 6,800. So that makes it a little bit harder, but like he can put up a nice score. But I think for me, these guys will be in game stacks and then avoided outside of game stacks is how I will treat it. Because what I really want is the game environment to take off. And so, you know, like a Keenan Allen, Justin Herbert, Quentin Johnston, Troy Franklin type build or something like that actually leaves a lot of salary left over too. And you're betting on this game environment taking off and the ways in which this game environment could take off. So I could see something like that, but for me, they're not one-offs.
Three other guys kind of in this mid 6K range that I think are interesting to talk about. Brian Thomas Jr., who the underlying usage has been great. There were plenty of clips floating around of him kind of not going all out, not making plays on the ball. Even Liam Cohen kind of had some comments about it. Mike Evans getting peppered with targets, but just hasn't had that explosion game yet. And then Nico finally scores after a pretty rough week one, but still not putting up a monster score. They're only 14.2 points. Any chance for those kind of alpha wide receivers to be good plays here?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're fighting uphill battles with Brian Thomas Jr. and Mike Evans because Brian Thomas Jr., Derek Stingley has been shadowing. Sauce Gardner has been shadowing. So like Mike Evans, Brian Thomas Jr., they have tough matchups. And that's not to say they can't beat tough matchups, but we talked last week that Brian Thomas Jr. and Trevor Lawrence never clicked last year. Brian Thomas Jr., like the perception we shaped of him, you know, I was talking in like week 5 last year. I said, I think it was 7,200 was the mark. I said BTJ was like 5,500. I was like, he's going to be priced at 7,200 by the end of the year. And it took whatever price I'd said, it took till week 17 or week 18 for him to actually hit that price tag because it took Mac Jones coming in and just peppering him with targets and them having that connection. It just never clicked with Trevor Lawrence last year, and it hasn't so far this year. And then you have Derek Stingley Jr. So that's one that to me, I like I said, this is another one where I'm going to have a small percentage of my builds stacks around this game because I see the scenario where this game plays a particular way. And that's where he will be. I don't think I'll have him outside of that. Mike Evans can always hit, but I in a game where I don't think the Jets are going to really be pushing things, I don't expect to go toward Mike Evans much, if at all. Nico's interesting. So what we're seeing with Houston is like, let's step back. Their issue last year was their offensive line, right? Everybody knows that, but it wasn't just their inability to block. It was their inability to pick up simple stunts. They could not, like, 4-man rush and the defensive line stunts, and the guard in the center go to like block somebody else, and so you get a free rusher because nobody's there for the stunt to block them. And so they traded away Laramie Tunsil. They basically downgraded their talent, but with the thought that because so much of offensive line is communication, the cohesion of the unit, they basically downgraded their talent thinking this would be a better unit. Then they fired Bobby Slowick thinking it was, you know, on him that he wasn't giving CJ Stroud enough command at the line of scrimmage, that he wasn't giving this offensive line enough help in terms of how to handle these things. Fire Bobby Slowick, bring in Nick Caley. And so they're thinking like, you know, less talent, but better unit, better coaching. And now we're 2 weeks in, it's the same problems, but with less talent. Like they're still not picking up stunts. They're still not passing things off well. There's still free rushers on 4-man rushes. And so it's a bad situation. And then on top of that, what Bobby Slowick was great at, remember he came from this Kyle Shanahan tree, and he was so great at these like layered routes, getting guys wide open 15 to 20 yards down the field and pulling the defense horizontally, vertically, and just figuring out how to get guys open. So Nico used to just always be wide open down the field. And now that's not the case anymore. So you've downgraded the talent on the offensive line. You still have the same problems on the offensive line. The scheme isn't getting Nico open the way that it was before. So that's the bear case for Nico. When I have a situation like that, especially early in the season, I also want to be like, hey, the NFL is weird and Nico's really good and he can just hit for some big plays here, right? And so he's sort of in my pool, but not because there are any things I can point to say this is why he'll do well. Like, Jamar Chase did well last week, but the way in which he did well is very different from Nico's skill set and how he's used. So that's not apples to apples, right? But that doesn't preclude the opportunity for Nico Collins to go out and have a big game. So yeah, to me, Nico is somebody to pay attention to and have exposure to because he can put up one of those scores you had to have. But I can't point to the reasons why it's going to happen here, if that makes sense.
No, for sure. This was a question from earlier, but I wanted to circle back to it now. Big Boy wondering about, Debo McLaurin, and I guess overall this offense, how it's going to operate with Mariota compared to Daniels, and any thoughts on those pass catchers being viable?
Yeah, I would think that Debo benefits more from Mariota and McLaurin gets hurt more from Mariota. And that might not play out in the small sample size of 1 week too. And I think a lot of people will see it that way. So there could be value in just saying, yeah, like McLaurin gets hurt by this switch, but if everyone overrates that and he puts up a big game, you're still winning a tournament with him. But McLaurin has such a low hit rate throughout his career of difference-making scores, right? He puts up a lot of solid scores, but you're hardly ever going to come out of a weekend and say, man, I didn't win because I didn't have McLaurin. And so with Mariota stepping in, that kind of just pushes me off of him. And then Debo, I think he's fairly priced for like how he's being used and what his ceiling is. There's always that chance that he just rips off a couple long runs after the catch and puts up 35 or 40 points, but it's been a while since we've seen that. And so he doesn't stand out to me as someone I'm excited to play. Probably have a little bit of him in my MME pool, but I think he benefits more from Mariota than McLaurin does.
We can do real quick just because they are priced pretty expensive, but any thoughts on Chase and Jefferson with these backup quarterbacks? Obviously Chase went nuts last week, even with Browning in the game. Some are the costs plus, new quarterback situations enough to keep you off them, or would you sprinkle these guys in?
That was my instinct at the start of the week, was like, I might want to have 5% of Jefferson and Chase on a roster to just play that little correlation with two high price guys a lot of people won't have together. As I got deeper in, I actually really like Jefferson here because I don't think that Wentz is Wentz a downgrade from Sam Darnold? Like, we don't know. You know what I mean? Like, he might be as good or better than Sam Darnold. And so Wentz has had a weird thing where like the tools are there. It's more mental that he is just he lost confidence for a while, lost his jobs, got criticized as a teammate, all that. But before all that happened, he was the front runner for MVP that second year of his career. He got tore his ACL, whatever it was, I think week 13. And he was the front runner for MVP at that point. Like, the guy has it in him to do well. And he's had good spurts even since then. So I think that Wentz in this offense with Justin Jefferson, I think it's a good setup here. And I actually really like JJ this week because I think people will be off of him. And I think that he has opportunity to put up one of these 32, 33-point games that people just aren't going to see coming against the Bengals defense everybody loves to attack. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's a backup quarterback and things haven't looked right. Let's stay off him. Jamar Chase. So what I like about Browning coming in is you got a bad offensive line in Cincy. And it's not like Burrow doesn't know that. And Burrow's talked about this publicly. Like, he feels like himself holding the ball longer, taking some bigger hits helps the offense more because he can wait and he can find these big plays. Well, Browning knows that that's not his skill set. And Browning knows that their offensive line isn't great. So what he's done before when he started is just get the ball out quickly and get it to his playmakers. And so I think that we will see some big Jamar Chase games with Browning under center. The question is, does it happen against Minnesota and this Minnesota defense? So I'm less interested in Jamar Chase than I am in Justin Jefferson. I can see it happening for Chase. I think that the matchup here makes me less likely to go there. Might have a little bit of him. Justin Jefferson, I'll definitely be overweight the field. I don't know what the field will have of him, but I know it won't be a ton, and I know that I'll have more than that. So, I like JJ in this spot.
Let's before we go to tight end, let's go kind of dumpster diving here. There's never a ton under 4K. I'll toss a couple names at you, and then if there's any other that stand out, Troy Franklin, obviously coming off of that big usage game. Hunter Renfrow has been getting some looks, and then Dontavian Wicks, with how banged up everybody is in that Green Bay pass catching core. Those guys, or any other value plays jumping out at wide receiver?
Yeah, Wicks is always in the mix when he's on the field. Hunter Renfrow, Derek Carr said it to you in your kickoff show. He's like, just tell Bryce Young, just always throw the ball to Hunter Renfrow. He'll always be open, and that's the thing. He's not going to get a lot of yards, but he's going to get open, and he's going to get open in the red zone. So we've seen Adam Thielen kind of in this similar role where he can get these 1 or 2 touchdown games. So the floor is really low on Renfrow, but this isn't if Coker's out for a while, this isn't the last, 15 to 20 point game we're going to see from Renfrow this season. I think Troy Franklin is being used well in this offense. I think that he's going to keep seeing these like 4 to 7 target games. There's going to be like a random 10 or 11 target game in here somewhere. So not a great matchup. A team that does great at not allowing downfield throws. So it's harder for Franklin to hit here, but I think he's viable. And then Ao Maynor is just a huge part of this Tennessee offense and has looked, I mean, he's the number one receiver, essentially. Like he's by middle of the season, he's going to be seeing more targets per game than Calvin Ridley and probably be priced higher than Calvin Ridley. So to me, fair value for him is about 5,500 right now, based on the way he's being used, the way he looks. And so even though I don't love this spot, I do think that at 3,700, he's tremendous value.
All right. We'll probably get to a couple other wide receivers when we build a lineup here, but let's head over and talk tight end. We get some of the big dogs back on the slate. Brock Bowers, Trey McBride. This Tucker Kraft situation is a little unfortunate. Popped up with an injury yesterday, looking like he's more doubtful than questionable just on the reports I've read for this week. But what are you seeing at the top end here for tight end?
Right. So if Bowers is healthy, I think he's a great play. The problem is we won't know that till he's out on the field. You know, he looked like he was running on one leg in week 2. And so we won't know if he's back to 90%, 95% until he's out there. So I think you take some risk with him, but obviously the ceiling is there. McBride, there's sort of a general rule that you could get away with of just don't play tight ends against Fred Warner and the 49ers defense. But Trey McBride has had a couple games over the last couple of years of, around 20 points in this matchup. And, that's just a play away from being an extra touchdown or an extra big play or whatever it is, right? So he can hit in this matchup. And then I think Tyler Warren, I think at this point we have to group him into this top guys group. And so definitely 4,400 is still underpriced for where we're going to see him as the season moves along. And this matchup against Tennessee doesn't scare me. The schemed usage is going to be there. The workload is going to be there. I sent to the props team yesterday over on 44.5 for Tyler Warren yards. By the time they finished researching it and like posting in the props channel, it was up to 47.5. By the time Reezy and I did our props podcast yesterday afternoon, it was up to 49.5. Like people are on this, right? Like Tyler Warren is a big part of this offense and is going to keep producing in this role. So I think that any of those guys are viable this week, all with, the typical tight end caveats and question marks that come with it.
Yeah. Some of the other guys that have been, on the menu for us, Juwan Johnson has had an awesome role. He's still priced under 4K at 3,900. Harold Fannin Jr. Continues to have an awesome role at 3,600. If we get Tucker Kraft ruled out, definitely worth talking about Luke Musgrave probably at 2,700. Any of those guys stand out to you?
Stand out? No, but I think they're all fine, right? I think you can play any of them. I think, and there's a broader bucket too. Jake Ferguson is in that bucket betting on this game environment. Kyle Pitts is in that bucket as a guy who probably will have like a 22 to 25 point game at some point this year. You just don't know when it's going to come. So it's, I said earlier this week, Kyle Pitts is one of those guys that I might just keep putting 4% Kyle Pitts into my pool every week, because I don't think I'll have an edge in predicting when that game's going to come, but I do think it's going to come and it'll be valuable when it does. TJ Hawkinson, a guy who, it started out so slowly that people are just going to be off of him and forget that when, the rule in the past has been like, hey, if Jordan Addison's out, focus on TJ Hawkinson because he's going to get a lot of targets. And that could come back to being the case in this spot. Jonnu Smith is always going to be schemed touches and opportunities to hit to the upside in this Arthur Smith offense. I mean, people hate on Jonnu Smith so much. Last year with the Dolphins, he was putting up 20 points every week, right? And he's going to have some more of those games here. He already has the 12.5 pointer to start the season. He's going to be used in this offense. So, I think it's a pretty big bucket. I think Juwan Johnson's the best play of the bunch in terms of the volume he's going to see against this zone-heavy Seattle defense. He's going to get targets sort of in that middle of the field. So I think that he's the one that stands out on paper the most. But, any of these guys could end up being sort of a key piece this week. And to me, I'm comfortable saying I don't think there's anything that I can point to that clearly separates one of these guys from the group as far as this is the guy who's going to hit. But I do think there's going to be players from this group who post nice scores this week.
All right. It's time for everybody's favorite here. We are going to get these ideas on their feet, put it together, and build a lineup on DraftKings. Let's get ready. All right, JM, you teased to me right before we went live a block of players here, and I don't think we really talked about them throughout the position by position. So let the people know where we're starting here.
Yeah, so first off, context on these blocks. So sometimes blocks are a stack, sometimes blocks are a unique combination of players. Like if we had used Christian McCaffrey and Bijan Robinson on this roster. And then sometimes it's like our favorite is when it's players who see a lot of volume on the same offense and they're cheap, and we can pair them together and treat them like one player and say, we don't really care where the points come from. We're just treating this like one player that we're spending this amount of salary on, covering 2 spots on our roster, which is even more valuable than covering 1 spot mathematically. And so here for this block, we have one player, quote unquote, who costs 8.5K. And through 2 weeks, this player, 8.5K. So put your mind as a pass catcher, put your mind in the headspace of an 8.5K pass catcher. What would you be looking for from them? So this 8.5K pass catcher has averaged 17.5 targets per game, 28.1 DraftKings points per game, scoring 24.9 and 31.1. Again, this quote player costs 8.5K, and this player is Rashid Shaheed plus Juwan Johnson. So the place where this play could break down is what I talked about earlier, that it's going to be tougher for the Saints to run this no huddle, hurry up offense in Seattle. They've had 2 games at home where obviously their fans are being loud when the other team has the ball and being quiet when they have the ball. And now they're going to be in Seattle, where it's going to be very different. Tough travel schedule to go from one corner of the country up to the other and then play against Seattle. So it's a different setup than we've seen so far. But also let go of what we think about Spencer Rattler, a guy who was, pretty widely mocked as like a potential 2nd-round pick, headed into his last college season as a potential 1st-rounder. Well, he fell to the 5th round, but it was just because nobody really needed that skill set, that tool set, right? Of that backup quarterback, that guy that they could try to develop. Like you could think of him like a 2nd-round pick. He won the job from Tyler Shuck, who they drafted this year, right? It would make more sense if it was close for Tyler Shuck to have the job. And Rattler's looked good so far. He doesn't look like he's about to be a top 8 quarterback or top 12 quarterback, but he has looked good. And a lot of just short area passing and marching the field that way, which against this Seattle zone defense should fit well, where they're going to try to get the ball out quickly because Seattle throws a lot at you and tries to confuse the quarterback. And so I think once again, we see these targets pile up for these guys. And we know that Shaheed can always do something with the ball in his hands. We know that Juwan Johnson can catch touchdowns. He can do stuff after the catch. And so, just a really nice setup where you've gotten 24 plus points from these 2 back-to-back weeks, 17.5 targets from these 2. You could also replace Shaheed with Olave, and it would be 21.5 targets and 27.7 DraftKings points per game. They've scored Olave plus Juwan Johnson scored 28 and 27.3. And then again, Juwan Johnson has been the one who's been consistent so far, but it could also be Olave and Shaheed this week. But just combos of wide receivers from this offense gives you access to a ton of cheap targets and allows you to do a lot else on the rest of your roster. So the way I look at this is not going to win you a tournament, but it can free up salary for a unique structure that other people don't have and give you a floor of points that most other people won't be starting with. So even if these guys score 22 combined, that's pretty good for your 8.5K in salary, where other people on their cheap pieces are not combining for 22 plus points. And then if they go for one of these, 24, 30, 33 point games, you're pretty far ahead of the field, even though that's not something you had to have. It's just a really nice floor of points, really nice starting point.
And I assume if you are playing a decent amount of these blocks, will you have any Rattler with them, or you just don't need to go there?
Yeah. So I was thinking through this last night because I didn't have this block until running some initial Bink Machine builds, and I didn't put any rules on as far as like how many flex players from different offenses I could have. And I got a lot of 2 of these pass catchers on a roster together. And I just started thinking about, my first instinct was like, all right, well, let's not save any of these rosters. And then it was like, okay, hold on, let's dig into this. And it started getting really interesting. So then I was thinking about the Rattler component, and it comes down to, I'm not betting on Rattler having a tournament winning game here for these guys to produce. And then he's cheap. So is Carson Wentz, so is Dak, so is Caleb Williams, like so are the other quarterbacks I like. So I don't necessarily need to play Rattler in order to tell the story of this hitting. I think you could pull in some Spencer Rattler rosters, but you absolutely don't have to just because you're playing this block.
Yeah. And there's, it's so tempting to just null wave some of those names in the same way people would have wanted to null wave Russell Wilson last week before he went completely nuts. So if the players or values or the wide receivers are certainly makes sense that the quarterback is going to be a part of that. Is this where we pay up for a couple of running backs, or what direction do you want to go next?
Yeah, I don't think we have to, but I think it's a fun way to build this roster is let's go ahead and throw in Bijan Robinson. Let's throw in Christian McCaffrey. Let's go as expensive as we can and just sort of see what we're able to do with a roster like this. So we know we're probably going to have to save at one other spot. So we could go A.O. Maynor. We could go like Tyler Warren in the flex. I think going all the way down to Alec A.O. Maynor is the way to go here, because then we can really see what our salary looks like from here and just have a sense of what we can do with the rest of this roster. So yeah, and then once we throw in a defense, which I'm not super deep into my defense research yet. So Pete, I'll let you pick the defense here, and then we'll kind of see how much salary we have left, because we'll be able to do something fun elsewhere on this roster.
Yeah, let's do something in like the, 2,800 to 3K range here. What do you think about like the Steelers or the Jags or Commanders?
Yeah, let's go with the Jags. Let's bet on that offensive line continuing to struggle. Tremendous pass rush and defensive line from the Jags. Anthony Campanelli's doing a good job with that defense too, just kind of confusing quarterbacks. So yeah, I like that one. And then what I'd like to do here is build this toward this Bears and Cowboys game. And I'm guessing we'll be able to fit in Caleb Williams, one of the Bears pass catchers, and CeeDee Lamb. And then if we're not able to do that, then we can kind of mess around and see what else we're able to.
It fits perfect.
There we go. Isn't it funny how like you do enough practice builds and you kind of just say, this should fit. It does. The worst is when it's like 100 or 200 off and you can't figure out how to make that work out. So yeah, I mean, that's a pretty simple and straightforward way to put this one together, but it's kind of conveys like what I'm getting at with this Saints block, which is just, it really opens things up to where now you look through and you're like, well, if this Bears and Cowboys game shoots out, like then CeeDee Lamb can put up 30, Rome Odunze can put up 25, Caleb Williams can put up 25 to 30. Well, Bijan and Christian McCaffrey could both put up 30. And now the fact that you have Shaheed and Juwan Johnson potentially combining for 20 to 30 to 35 points, like you just piled so many points onto this roster with combinations that other people aren't going to have. And so, yeah, some people have the Caleb Odunze, CeeDee Lamb set up, but most people aren't going to have that paired with Bijan Robinson and Christian McCaffrey, which immediately sets your roster apart. And then most people who are trying to do something like that, they're having to save salary in ways that are like non-correlated, and you're hoping to get two different cheap guys right. Whereas we're just saying like, hey, these two cheap guys together are going to get enough targets that we got a good shot at getting these points. And so it really starts to elevate your roster above what other people are putting out there.
So for the audio listeners here, if you're not seeing the full lineup on screen, we got Caleb Williams at quarterback. We got those two elite running backs, Bijan Robinson and Christian McCaffrey. We have that Saints block, Rashid Shaheed and Juwan Johnson. Completing the Caleb Williams stack is CeeDee Lamb with a Rome Odunze bring back. We have Alec A.O. Maynor as our salary saver there at 3,700. And then we have the Jags defense here. I am curious. I don't know if I got specifically if price was completely equal with Caleb Williams and Dak, or like say you had the extra 300 on this lineup, would you prefer Caleb or Dak?
I prefer Caleb on this. I prefer Caleb on this lineup because to me, Caleb is the driver of this game environment. And he's also he's got more rushing upside than Dak does. So I'm fine either way. Like I'll probably have equal exposure to the two in my MME pool. And then I'll probably have a little bit more money on Caleb overall, right? So most weekends I play 6K and about 1,350 of that is in the slant, right? Because max enter the slant at $9 for 150 rosters. So that other, 4,700, 4,600, I'll probably have a little bit more of that on Caleb than on Dak, but it'll be somewhat close, right? So bankroll allocation will tilt toward Caleb. Exposure will be somewhat even. And that's, it's Friday as we say this. And so this could obviously all change, but that's sort of how I'm seeing things right now and how I'm playing around with things in my head. And prefer Caleb just because he's going to be the driver, but I think it's close between the two because if Caleb does drive it forward, Dak could easily outscore him.
Getting some fun suggestions from the chat. Definitely different ways you could go at cheap wide receiver. All guys we mentioned, Wix, Blizzy likes the Renfro, all kinds of fun tweaks and permutations you could do on this. And as JTK1 says, we have to offer our PSA. Please don't dupe this roster. At least tweak the defense, tweak the punt, wide receiver there. Maybe get up to Olave, mess around with it a little bit. I should mention, as always, we got the 20% off rolling for 1 week season Inner Circle DFS subs with promo code Pete. You get 20% off. If you just want to try a 1 week pass to sample the site, the code will work on that. You can also get, of course, rest of season packages. JM, let people know, what else am I missing and what kind of goodness can they find over on 1 week season?
Yeah, so we're doing a Bink Machine special. It's $1 for access to the optimizer this week.
Nice.
And you see that at the top of the screen there. I don't actually know what the code is. What is the code? Does it say there?
Code BINK1.
Bink1 or Binks1.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's just to give you an opportunity to use the optimizer. And I think even if you're single entry 3 max player, there's so much value in using the optimizer because you can just have it run. You can make small changes to your player pool and then just let it run rosters and see what it puts out there. And it can give you ideas or maybe even give you a roster that you really like. So I've had a lot of weekends, or I talked about, I got the Saints block from just building rosters and that showing up and being like, oh, this is actually interesting that we dig into it. One of my biggest weekends ever was, a roster was given me in the optimizer that I really liked, but I was like, I want to change these 2 pieces. And then those 2 pieces made a difference. So it can just kind of help you with your hand building, even if you're doing hand building single entry 3 max. And so we've got a $1 pass in the Bink Machine this week. I think it's worth using that.
Awesome. Yeah. And obviously just referencing the normal stuff that you get week in and week out, the NFL Edge, which has the full game by game breakdowns, and then the scroll, which populates, from now until lock, including JM's, player pool, Sunday updates, all kinds of great stuff here in the scroll, all of it available with your Inner Circle and DFS subs. Take advantage of that 20% off. Jam, looks like we got maybe time for one more question here before Youdacao joins for the second half of the show in Bully the Sims. There was one question in here that I thought was interesting. One thing we saw happen a lot last year was just the lower price tight ends were projecting better and performing better than the comparably priced wide receivers, in that 3 to 4K range. We saw a lot of double tight end lineups last week that were bubbling up. And so Waylon's asking thoughts on double tight end domination again this year. And I know you're up for it because you even mentioned throwing Tyler Warren in the flex of that build we were just working on.
Yeah. So it's weird. If you compare, we know tight end is thin, but then they're pricing them so low that if you compare average tight end scoring from these lower ends to average wide receiver scoring from lower priced guys, you start to see that these lower priced tight ends are underpriced compared to the wide receivers in the same price range. Even, last year we could look at Trey McBride's average points per game and his ceiling, Brock Bowers' average points per game and his ceiling, and they were priced lower than the wide receiver, or they were performing better than the wide receivers priced around them, right? They were underpriced compared to where wide receivers were priced. And so that, a lot of times it's by $500 or $700, but that adds up over time. And so, yeah, I do think that there's a lot of value in going to these double tight end builds if you're not just throwing darts at tight end, right? We can get in this habit of being like, oh, tight end sucks, so let me just pick a guy. But if you're going like 2 guys who have real, like the Juwan Johnson, Tyler Warren one where, between the 2 of them, they're getting 20 targets a week. There could be a week where that changes, but over time, that's going to keep happening to where these guys are involved in their offenses. And I really like the double tight end build. I think this is another week where it ends up being sharp to do that.
There you go. Let's see here. James with a question. I don't think you guys have underdog draft stuff at OWS ... yet, right?
No, we don't. We had stuff for a couple of years that was actually free, and it just wasn't, our audience wasn't really into it. So we got to bring more of your audience over for the underdog content. We would love to bring it back. But it was one of those where we do a survey at the end of the season of what content did you read each week? And it was like, 3% of people were saying they were reading the underdog content. So we cut that one out. But obviously you're getting great underdog content from Pete as well. But if we ever get demand for that, that'll come back as well.
And I will just say in general, the reading through the NFL Edge and the scroll and stuff, you can apply so much of what we're talking about, our game environment situations, and you can apply that to your underdog builds. Like I love it just from an idea generation. And then yes, like when I do the show with Nez later, often on the clock, we'll get into more the ownership and the specifics of slates and all of that good stuff. But so much that you can apply in both game formats. And if anything, there's often really fun spots where, last week, you had the David Njoku. I think I talked about it with you, where it was like David Njoku on underdog was going almost completely undrafted, and Fannin wasn't. And Fannin was a way better play on DraftKings, and Njoku ended up being a way better play on underdog, just the way the contests kind of shake out and those formats differ. So it's always fun to kind of be able to split your exposures in smart ways across those sites as well.
Yeah, and also you mentioned the NFL Edge, so just a shout out on that you can also get that in audio form on the 1 Week Season podcast feed. Just listen to all the games being broken down and kind of overviews of what to expect in terms of how these teams will attack each other and try to win those games.
All right. Great stuff as always. JM here with the block party. If you guys are just tuning in and you missed it, I will always post the audio for these as well on Saturday mornings. That's on the In a Vacuum podcast feed. Make sure you guys check out 1 Week Season. Use that promo code Pete to get the 20% off. And now we are going to get ready to talk some more ball with Youdacao. We'll see you next time, JM.
See you, bye.
All right, time for Bully the Sims, joined this week once again with Youdacao. Yuda, how are we doing?
Good. Ready to go week 3.
That's right. Yeah. How did your week 2 go?
Week 2, not good. I don't know. What do we have here? I think a lot of Dak, but I don't think it really mattered, right? It was more
bust.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't really have the Goff. Yeah.
So we're on to week 3. What is your contest selection these days? What kind of stuff are you playing? Everything, MME, small field? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, just whatever I can get into. Just trying to set in different ways for the different contests. But yeah, whatever they post, I'll play.
All right. So and then how much tweaking are you? Are you making adjustments based on field size? Obviously, we're looking at that and run the sim stuff. Your 150 lineups versus say are you playing in the Thunderdome or something smaller like that? What kind of changes are you making there?
Just like not having, to some extent, it would be like correlation. So Thunderdome, some weeks it might be just smart to like onslaught the highest total, depending on like how ownership plays out in like these smaller fields. But construction is just like, if it's a high stakes, you kind of just go like 1 degree of freedom off of like your optimal, what the industry might think is optimal. And if your stuff is actually independent, it doesn't really matter. You can just play what you like. And then obviously the larger the fields get, the more either correlated or different as far as ownership you get.
Right. Yeah. And that's the nice thing too. I mean, we were messing around with it in the Sims last week. Obviously with the Run the Sims and stuff, you can adjust the size of the contest and the payout structure. And then you can kind of start to see how lineups, really differ in whatever's popping there. We're going to try to tweak the format a little bit to the show this week. Last 2 weeks, it was a lot of walking through the Sims tutorial, getting familiar with that. Want to pick Yuda's brain more this episode. So some of the things we're going to hit today, some of the situations with the biggest input volatility where we might want to be bullying the Sims or tweaking stuff. I want to get Yuda's favorite game environment of the week. Talk a little bit about if there's any bad chalk stuff we can fade. Definitely want to get your thoughts on the Jordan Mason, who I anticipate being very popular. Maybe some favorite stacks, contrarian stacks, and then we'll kind of pull up some of the lineups in the Run the Sims Sim Runner Pro and see if any of them kind of jive with this overall kind of macro outlook on the slate. So yeah, let's talk right here at the top as far as where do you think are some fragile situations this week? And we can even start with the backup quarterbacks, right? Because we're going to have so many guys stepping in here, Marcus Mariota, Carson Wentz, any of those situations or others that stand out to you?
Yeah, we have Mariota. So with Mariota, I don't really think that's a huge change because they have Mariota specifically because of the Jaden Daniels role. So it's just sort of like continuity with the role. Obviously he's going to be less shifty, but it's still going to be a guy who can like run the draws, bigger body at the goal line. So I don't even know if the TD equity at the goal line would go down there.
Mhm.
So not really any changes there. I wouldn't even say it's a huge drop off in a matchup like this, where it's not a super high resistance matchup. They could still probably just execute their game plan.
Yeah. Well, then that certainly makes some of the pass catchers interesting. Would you take a shot on any of the running backs here? Is it just still such a split committee that there isn't really anything you can get to for fantasy?
Yeah, I don't think you can get there.
Yeah. What about the other kind of new situation that people are going to be thinking about is Carson Wentz taking over for the Vikings? What's your read on that?
With him, and how McCarthy's been playing, I don't really even know if that's like a shock to the system. It actually might be a bit of a stabilizing force. I think the play calling is probably going to be much more vanilla, and given like the opponents also running backups, that could sort of tone down, I guess, upside of this game. But they're priced so cheap that it might not really matter. Like if you just happen to run good on a big play or get there with like efficiency through the air, or the goal line stuff happens through the air or something like that, 20 from like a Carson Wentz is like more than enough to pay off if it's like coming with like 30 from Justin Jefferson or something like that. And same goes for Browning, actually. That's actually the more input volatile spots that might be overlooked, is that they can kind of only play one way too, because they can't really run block. And, Chase Brown can't really pass protect. So they're kind of going to have to play spread anyway. And, with the Vikings defensive line, it's not as if they can just like really have success running on first and second down, even if they like wanted to do it going in. So with Browning, I don't know if you remember, like in like 2023, he came in at the end of the season, they're like 6-6, and basically did not even a poor man's Burrow. He did like a almost Joe Burrow impression with what they had. Threw it a bunch, had a lot of good scores. I think they even played the Vikings near the end, and they had like a bit of a garbage time shootout against the Vikings back then, when it was like, I don't know if it was Darnold or someone else, but I wouldn't just assume that Browning can't sling it.
Yeah, I was looking at some of those splits. I think it was 6 or 7 games that he played. And yeah, the Browning off of Burrow, like fantasy point scores weren't that different. The Chase scores weren't that different. T. Higgins was the one who took the biggest hit, which kind of makes sense, I think, right? That Browning just kind of locks in on his number one, not going through the progressions maybe in a way Joe Burrow would.
Sure. So if we're going to talk about some volatile spots, you could just sort of play for a bit of a shootout there.
Mm-hmm.
Best receivers are in the game, are in this game. And they probably go under-owned because you have like all the AK running backs either being underpriced or just having great matchups.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, right? Because if like you said, we've seen Kevin O'Connell with guys even like Nick Mullins, facilitate really big games here. It's our last game without Jordan Addison in the offense. No one wants to touch TJ Hawkinson because he's done nothing through 2 weeks. But it's like, if you actually get this passing game humming, and then you also have Jordan Mason, who's going to be wildly popular, like all of a sudden Carson Wentz, Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson stuff, that starts to be pretty interesting to me.
That's actually what it was. It was Browning versus Mullins.
Okay.
So it's kind of a mirror situation.
Yeah.
And they had Ty Chandler in like the Mason role, because I guess the starter was out at running back. And it's 27-24. Both QBs throw 300.
Wow. Yeah, I wanted to see if I could find this this box score there. There it is. Yeah, December 16th, 2023. Pretty interesting to get a near mirror there. 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions for Mullen, 2 touchdowns and an interception there. But Chase 4 for 64. Addison is the one who went off in this one, 6 for 111 and 2.
I mean, Bengals stack just doesn't get there because 15 guys caught a ball.
Yeah, I remember that game. I mean, holy shit, we're getting Mitchell Wilcox, Irv Smith, Charlie Jones, Yoshi Voss. That is insane. All right, so that is definitely a spot worth checking out. Any other situations that seem
Yeah, I would
kind of
caveat
attractive
it
to you?
by saying like it's like not a playoff race in this situation, and so I think these teams are more likely to want to establish like their identity rather than just do whatever it takes to win a game.
Okay,
Usually, when you're going all in to try to win a game, that's when the QB dictates because he's just the guy who has the ball first.
gotcha.
So you could easily just see like Vikings kind of struggling coming out. They just want to try to like grind to a win, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's been pretty shaky. So if they're able to run it 20 times, they probably just try to run it 20 times.
Yep. What are any of these other spots that are, I don't know, maybe a riddle to you, or ones where you might IKB the projection, tweak some market share stuff that you think is particularly fragile?
I don't think it's like the same as last week where there was more to gain from guesswork and like the spots were better to like execute on, like sort of like the bounce back spots I talked about last week and like the Fan Njoku splits.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's as much to gain. There could be like guys ramping up still. I think of a spot like Patriots or something. Drake May's been playing pretty well, but all their receivers are running like 70% participation.
Yeah.
So maybe like a Diggs route participation. Because I don't know if they like brought him in to like have him run 70% or like he's too busy off the field. But like Diggs at like 90% would probably be pretty good spot at 4.8 with like a second-year QB playing well.
Yeah. Yeah. My only read on it with Diggs is just that he was never like fully healthy. And there was like a report right before the season started, because it just doesn't make sense his participation being this low if he is fully healthy, because then, I mean, he's probably washed otherwise if it's not health.
I mean, you can't even say he's washed because he was good last year, but unless that is like the career ender.
Yeah. How do you think about, obviously the weaponry is an issue with Drake May. What do you think of like the game environment? Like, is this a game that you think could get nutty, or is this going to be more slow paced?
I mean, you would side with it probably being slow paced, but I think a lot of people would have said the same thing last week. I think he just might be good enough to do like the mini Josh Allen impression. So when he's down, when they're down or something, he could probably carry the team a little bit. And when they're up, it's kind of like he still has the touchdown equity at the goal line.
Let's see here. On the overall slate, and we'll get into some of the fun game environments, or maybe we pivot there now. I mean, Dallas Chicago is the one game with a total over 50. Does this feel like a spot you have to embrace, or is it going to be, something that everybody's gravitating to, and there might be better spots?
Is that what the ownership says? I'm not.
Yeah, so right now, Caleb and Dak are looking like they are going to be two of the most popular. Rome is going to be really popular, but nothing like crazy ownership from what I'm seeing.
It is pretty high for Caleb.
Yeah.
I mean, I would probably just side on the Dak side again because none of his receivers have truly popped yet. Mm-hmm. That total is pretty warranted, though. Like the Dak is legitimately playing very well, and his protection hasn't held up well at all. He's kind of been running for his life, but they've also played like Eagles, Giants, so it's two of the probably top 5 or 10 pass rushing units, and Bears are definitely near the bottom in that regard. They lost Jalen Johnson like second quarter last week. That's sort of when like the game went on steroids too, with like Detroit really doing whatever they wanted. So without Jalen Johnson, those DBs might be the worst in the league.
Wow.
Like the Nashawn Wright tape last week for the the Bears really bad. So
Yeah.
Without a pass rush, Dak playing well, Dak not really being as pressured. Javonte Williams has like 3 touchdowns so far.
I was gonna ask what you thought about those running backs in this game. 6,100 Javonte, 5,600 Swift. No one like loves those guys or ever feels good playing them, and yet they're the clear starters in the game of the week. Would you be dabbling with those guys on your teams?
Well, considering it's like the highest total and ownership's going to go there, people are going to want fireworks from like that leverage standpoint. If you just have Javonte get like a 18, 20 carry scenario, can like kind of mess up the whole game, that's good. But I kind of don't really like the price of Javonte having scored 3 touchdowns while the QB has like, I don't know, 3 or 4 passing touchdowns. CD has CD gotten one yet?
I don't believe he has.
Yeah. So between the receivers, there's like 1 touchdown, and the running back is 3. So just on like a mean reversion end, I don't like Javonte.
Yeah,
but it's the high environment. So
yeah. How do you think about you mentioned some of the onslaughts, and I know that those have simmed well, particularly in small field. How do you think about that? Because that always like trips me up, where it's like, yeah, like I get the macro correlation concept. If the offense scores 40, you want all those points. But like you said, with a guy like Javonte, if he has the 2 touchdowns, you could get what we saw in week 1 with the Cowboys, where it's like the passing game doesn't get home. Are there running back profiles that you're more inclined to include in an onslaught, or is it just the entire bet on the offense that's attractive?
I mean, you'd much prefer the running back that catches the touchdown.
Yeah,
it's sort of simple as that. I mean, Javonte's never profiled as like a pass catching running back. He's had those roles, but on that end, he's kind of replacement level.
Yeah. Yep, that one is interesting. As far as the pass catchers on the Bears, I do think Rome is going to be significantly more popular than DJ Moore. With the rookies not really involved yet, are there in the tight ends, obviously kind of splitting stuff? Is there anything outside of Rome and DJ Moore you can do with the Bears?
You can't, but like since their ownerships are relatively the highest for guys on this slate, I might just have the relative fade on there. So I don't really have a lean with like necessarily like the side. Maybe Dallas I favor a little bit just because Dak's playing well and he has like a sort of a big positive shift as far as like matchup shift compared to his first 2 matchups, while like Caleb hasn't necessarily played too well, but he's gotten there to a greater extent than Dak, and his ownership's higher, and like Rome's already popped off. So like I probably don't try to chase Rome.
Yeah, I asked JM this too, but how do you handle spots like this where it is the late game, and it is going to be some of the most popular pieces on the slate? Is this something you build in mind of like, hey, if I'm doing well, I can eat it. Otherwise, I might need to get off this?
Yeah, that's the easiest spot to have. Like the hammer be the popular game is like the easiest spot to plan for, because it's exactly what you said. And actually, I like that. If we're going to talk the sneaky games, I actually kind of like the Arizona, San Francisco as far as going overlooked anyway.
And
so
that
it actually makes her really,
pivot.
Makes her really like clean and like kind of obvious swap if you have that at your disposal.
Yeah, talk about that game. Obviously, we're going to get Mac Jones here again. He's priced up from the 4K last week to 5K, still without most of the guys. Juwan Jennings been a little banged up, but like, where are the spots here? Because I do think nobody's going to really want to play this. People are kind of scared of James Conner and Trey Benson splits. Trey McBride doesn't score touchdowns. Like, how are you getting into this game?
Well, like Kyler's been sneaky good so far, and he keeps getting a little more removed from his like injuries that sort of sapped his explosiveness. So also they played like Saints and who they play, Carolina. So he hasn't had to do too much. I think he has some hero ball in him. His stack partners are pretty well priced there.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people out on Marvin Harrison. So I like all that. I like that a lot from like the raw projection, which isn't even that bad, to like ownership and pricing standpoint.
Yeah.
And it looks like even we're a little bit low on Marvin Harrison. Like the pedigree is a little bit too good to be projecting him for like an 11.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, are we even sure that Brock Purdy is that much better than Mac Jones, or even better at all? Like, or maybe Shanahan can turn any white QB into Brock Purdy. Like, I think you can't really rule that out. Just the design, their play calling is so good. He didn't even play well last week, did Mac Jones, I think.
Yeah.
Granted, it was a good matchup, but he's still, 3 touchdowns, 280.
The other thing we should mention is Brock Purdy was back at practice today, and Kyle Shanahan said he does have a chance to play. I assume you're still pretty into this game either way.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably rather it be Mac Jones, though, just because people don't want to click Mac Jones.
Yeah.
Like their team does lack the playmakers to like really speed up a game because there's no speed. Like Pearsall can go a little bit, but if they're doing well on offense, it's just because they're going 10 yards at a time, not really getting like first down into the first down too much. But like, again, with like these prices, like you can just get there on the touchdown variance, efficiency, hope one of the touchdowns of McCaffrey comes through the air like it did last week. But I can see like either side really being able, like once one side is down, I think they're happy to really pace it up. So
what would be your favorite way to play? Would it be like a Kyler, Marv, CMC, or something like that?
I think you could actually do it any which way.
Okay.
Really, because they all have viable receiving options. I would probably not try to get into Connor too much because a lot of time Connor getting there is going to be like rushing touchdown heavy.
Yep.
That's kind of like a Kyler rushing touchdown fade or like a receiving touchdown fade for Arizona. Yeah. But at least with McCaffrey, you have the guy who's very game flow proof.
Nice. Let's swing back real quick to talk about good chalk or bad chalk here as far as Jordan Mason. I do anticipate he is going to be the most popular player on the slate with Aaron Jones ruled out. Obviously, your overall lineup construction is going to matter if Jordan makes sense, but do you have a gut reaction on whether you'd want to play a 40% owned Jordan Mason?
It's a good question. I think it just depends.
Yeah.
I don't think it's bad chalk. But I think that if you're not playing him, you kind of want to get involved in like some of the passing aspects of this game because I don't really think he has that much pass catching chops.
Right.
I really think his big upside scenarios here is just like 100 yards rushing and like 2 touchdowns.
Yeah. So is that kind of two where you're thinking like you see potential for this game where you're basically going to want to play it from either angle? Like if you're playing the popular Mason stuff or play like, hey, Jefferson, Hawkinson, Wentz are getting things done.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in, I guess, like almost like combination ownership where like aren't all the running backs going to be pretty high? Like Bijan is Carolina.
Yeah.
Taylor's cheap and McCaffrey is the whole offense. So like you can only play 3 of them max.
Yes. I think what you'll see is Mason paired with CMC, Mason with Bijan, Mason with Taylor. Like those pairings are going to be very popular.
Right. I guess, I mean, who's to say you don't have like another one of them in the flex?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Do you have any?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Do you have any like rules you make as far as like 2 running back or three running back teams, or is it just pretty situational for you?
Nothing like really hard like that, but if it's like more obvious, like the puzzle pieces just really fit too easily. Like if it's like a tight pricing on the week, but then you still have this Mason, McCaffrey, and then like a really cheap tight end or something that makes it all work, I might like exclude like that trio for that week. But I don't think this is that.
You mentioned the Arizona, San Francisco. Are there any other kind of sneaky stacks or game environments that you think have the potential to, pop off or be something you want to target?
I mean, we touched on the Cincinnati just because it's happened before, and Browning might not be entire dust. I mean, the best I got really is that Arizona one. Just looking at these, it's not the most appetizing. Like if I'm into it, it's actually only from like a relative pricing and ownership standpoint, not like I think the game is gonna potentially go crazy, like how I feel about San Francisco might. I mean, just looking at it, like the Jacksonville total is pretty good. It's probably like at like 22.5. That is, I'm not sure why it's that high, but it's like higher than what their typical team average would be historically.
Yeah.
And is it their home debut?
I think you might be right. No, or week 1, did they play at home? Yeah.
Yeah, they play Carolina. Like Lawrence at like unowned to Brian Thomas, who nobody likes right now, is like the definition of sneaky, but it's not as if like I think it's likely to hit. So
yeah.
But it's spots like that where like you do have like a QB who can easily score 25, 30, receiver who can score 30, and they're both like 5%. Yeah. That's probably good.
Yeah, the Brian Thomas usage has been awesome. It's just he's banged up, and there was all what did you make of this stuff as far as like his effort? There was all the stuff of him not making plays on the ball. Do you think he's just kind of checked out right now, or what's your read on that?
Not too much, but he could have been checked out on a few plays. He's certainly less encouraging as far as like I don't know. He's had a 2-game stretch this poor all of last year.
Yeah.
So certainly not inspiring. But I guess like at 6.4K, there's nothing wrong with taking a shot, especially since no one's using it. Yeah.
I didn't get to talk a ton about this with JM. What are your thoughts on Tyrod Taylor coming in for Fields? We also had like the Breece Hall dip last week after a big week 1. How do you think about Tyrod's influence, on Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall?
I mean, I haven't been that too in on Breece. I'm not sure he's like really like A tier talent as it is. I think it was just like the opportunity that he's had, and like a lot of the times I feel like when he's had these big plays, it's actually just either in like these catch-up spots or like it was actually kind of yielded by the defense. So I'm not sure like about Breece actually creating his points to like a huge extent. But I mean, to your question, like Tyrod, he did come in and go crazy. He's kind of like a guy that you can easily plan for though. Like I remember like whenever he's done well, like in a backup role, a lot of times it would be like the game he came in, he would crush. Maybe the first week he started, and then he gets figured out really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, and then on like the other side too, I mean, this game only has a 43.5 total. The Bucs offensive line is pretty beat up. No Godwin again. Igbuka's a little injured. Is there anything on the Bucs side? Bucky Evans, is that pretty much it?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it could change if like Igbuka does get ruled. but like they're also like just kind of scraping by right now. I mean, the total's gone down a little bit. Like it is still high though, like 24.5 or 25 at home.
Yeah.
So like I'm a little bit surprised by these totals. It could be like early season stuff. Yeah, but I don't mind it. I don't mind it actually. Like I'm not sure people really go in on like I'm not sure people go in on like going deep into this game. But you wouldn't really be surprised if it had a bit of a shootout. It would be less crazy than the Jets-Pittsburgh game shooting out.
Yeah. One thing the chat was going crazy about earlier was the Chargers wide receivers and who Patrick Surtain would be covering. Do you have any thoughts on those guys? Obviously Keenan, Ladd, QJ, and then how Denver might try to slow them down.
Have people looked into sort of how Surtain travels the field? If he's like shadowing right now, or if he's just playing like X?
I saw arguments in the chat. I don't know if anyone had done the deep digging here on it.
Okay, I'll take a quick look.
All right, I'll let
I'm not overly concerned since it's like there's 3 guys.
Yeah.
And they can all play. And also, Surtain hasn't really been a force at all thus far. So I'm not, for that reason, I'm not overly concerned.
Yeah, and Ladd's pretty expensive at 6,800. I do think Keenan is going to be fairly popular. Back-to-back games with touchdowns. And again, the conversation, a lot of people are saying, hey, if Surtain's on Ladd or QJ on the outside, then Keenan is going to be the beneficiary inside. Do you think, do you like this game at all, or the Chargers passing attack?
So actually, I think their rotation isn't like that defined. If we're looking at where these guys run, like Ladd is more of a slot receiver than Keenan.
Yeah.
It's just Keenan has had that historic. It's only clear that like QJ's on the outside, but I think they're really splitting that role. So I can't really favor any one of those two for that reasoning. But I mean, it's so early that I would still rather just play like mean reversion stuff and just like kind of fade Keenan relatively to the other two.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I do anticipate him being.
Although like Bo Nix has been terrible, so I'm not sure the game can really have too much pushback.
Yeah. What did you make of Troy Franklin kind of leading that team and Cortland Sutton taking a backseat in week 2? Is that just Sean Payton blip on the radar?
It's just Payton. I can't. I don't even know.
All right, he's confusing even you. Yeah, because he's a guy I could see people gravitating to as salary relief this week. 4K, Troy Franklin. Are there any other cheap guys that you'd be interested in?
No, but it's you don't really need that because you have the running back with Mason. I mean, Keenan, like Odunze is so cheap, so like that's going to draw a lot. Maybe Olave with like the roll could be fun. Since they're throwing it at a little bit higher than what you'd expect.
Yeah.
Dontavian Wicks super cheap.
Yeah, Wicks is an interesting one. What's your take like on Green Bay, because Jordan Love has played awesome, but they just aren't getting pushed. The defense is so good, and their weaponry now. No Jaden Reed, probably no Tucker Kraft this week. How do you think about the Packers?
I mean, there's your input volatile spot. Or you don't even really need Dontavian Wicks to play that much, but he's always been able to get open. He's played very well so far. So maybe they reward him by like giving him 75, 80%, something like that.
Yeah.
Tucker Kraft can't score all the points.
Do you think the Browns can hang in that game and force them to throw a little bit more? Or is it just going to be a Josh Jacobs spot?
It doesn't have to be. I mean, it's just like that touchdown variance aspect. Even if the Browns don't hang, though, even when they don't hang, they're just giving you the ball back really fast. So it's
Yeah.
you just need the efficiency. I mean, it's a lot of like that's why this week is a little bit tougher because there's a lot of these like wanting to have that efficiency to get there rather than being confident that there could be back and forth.
Yeah. I did just run some of the sims here. I thought we could maybe look at a couple of lineups here, see what kind of lines up with some of the takes here. Do you see a couple Mac Jones lineups popping up here? That's a Jawan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall.
And it's a lot of Dak too. I have some concerns. I came on here last week. I was talking up Dak. I listened to the ETR show on Saturday. They all were all over like Pickens, Dak. Did I go into small field? Dak's like 15%, and I had him like 7%.
Yeah. Well, and this top lineup here is actually a Dak triple. And I will say the settings I used here, I did like a 3K size contest with a standard.
Yeah. I was only speaking on like the like having some takes. I don't know if that's good if industry it actually shifts industry.
Well, there you go. What do you someone had asked about this in the other show, seeing like these double tight end lineups. This top one is a Jake Ferguson, Kyle Pitts. Is that something you just kind of let happen, or do you like making some rules to try to limit that?
I'd let that go because Pitts is cheap and London can get there on volume. And a lot of the time, like one of these guys scores, for example, is because the other guy caught 2 or 3 balls that possession.
Yeah. Does this light up pass the sniff test for you? A Joe Flacco double to Judy and Fannin?
No, not really, because you got Josh Jacobs who can get 25 carries.
Yeah. And
he's not the one who's like breaking off like that 80-yarder, speeding up the game. So no, I wouldn't say that passes. But I mean, the top few, yeah. Like the first one looks good to me.
Yeah, the second one is a Herbert to Keenan skinny stack. No Denver or anything. Has the double wide receiver without the quarterback.
I mean, I'm not too into that either. Also with the CD Cowboys.
Yeah.
I mean, Cowboys, I guess Cowboys, if it's in this one of the simmed defenses, could be actually good since everyone likes Odunze, Caleb Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, now that I think about it, Cowboys, like the Bears, don't really have much of a pass protection. I mean, Cowboys Javonte is kind of square as far as like busting that game. But if there are actually a lot of ownership there, Cowboys Javonte Williams is probably good.
Yeah. This
actually we're seeing a lot of Pollard. So like Taylor's pretty high owned. Pollard is pretty anti-correlated Taylor.
For sure. Yeah, Pollard showing up on 4 of these. Yeah,
Pollard touching the ball 20 times might have Taylor touches go from like 20 to 16. Because they're both kind of like carry heavy.
Yep.
So Pollard's probably good.
Yeah, I like the Pollard thing here. Star Tours has a question. We haven't really talked much about Eagles and Rams. Do you think that game can shoot out?
Just because they played each other recently in the playoffs, they have that familiarity. I don't think it's as likely because they have that element. And like they're both basically probably playoff bound teams. So like you can't really a lot of times the game shootouts because someone does something stupid, like on like a safety or someone like just blows something, and these teams don't do that. And also Stafford has been playing lights out. And like you would think that's an argument that it can shoot out, but actually him playing lights out is like ball control, convert third downs, more so like because they don't have like that. Like you might think Puka's like that big play guy, but actually he has a much higher skill in like retaining possessions, getting first downs than like actually speeding the game up.
Yeah.
And we know like the Eagles are not trying to do that either.
It is interesting. I mean, we're seeing some Jordan Mason up here. It's not like in every lineup in a way where it's like what do we toss around the term free square? At least he's not showing up in these lineups as like an absolute, must play.
Yeah. I mean, I actually think probably one of the reasons that's the case is that you have a lot of playable options. And now with all the cheap QBs, you can get any receiver and any top end running back too.
Yeah. The one thing we
was tight, we would see Mason at like 50, 45.
I wanted to pull up Jefferson because I wasn't seeing him in any of those top ROI lineups. Here he is showing up in a couple. Here's a Carson Wentz there. And this goes back to kind of the volatility thing, right? Where you're going to probably have to kind of boost that projection a little bit to get it more.
Yeah. I mean, did we even see any of Browning Chase?
Let's see. Browning here. Yeah, that stuff's even lower. Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, that's Browning, Chase, Wentz, Jefferson. That probably comes at the expense of Mason a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, Jake Browning, Jamar Chase. The highest EV is 20%, which not great. And then the Carson and Jefferson, at least.
That's price true. Wentz is cheaper. Jefferson's really cheap too for him.
Dude, this lineup is wild. Double pay up tight end, Brock Bowers and Trey McBride. Do you have any thoughts on either of those guys?
No, that's like when I talk about combo ownership, that's a good team for that because the team that has Bowers and McBride is really unlikely to have the other one.
Right.
So like this week, even like if you buy like it's a different topic, but like if you just jammed like Bijan, McCaffrey, Taylor, that's not really fading Mason. That's just saying you really like these other guys and they can all get 30. And that's another way that like whatever Mason's projected for like 17 or something becomes irrelevant.
Right. So then what other ways? I mean, we talked about going the Wentz Jefferson angle. You mentioned on the Cowboys game, if you were kind of trying to fade that, something like Javonte, Cowboys defense, are those kind of the ways you would leverage that?
Yeah, but I mean, I think the Sims have kind of spoken with that, just there being like 4 out of 10 DAX in the first.
Mm-hmm.
I think it likes stack. I probably just run it back a little bit there. Yeah, Caleb.
Yeah, it is interesting the Caleb stuff not popping near as much as Dak. I wonder if that's just the pass catchers looking better in the Sims with CD and Pickens versus
maybe the ownership side with Caleb Rome being higher.
Mm-hmm. Yup. Pretty interesting. There's a random Marvin Mims appearing in the top Caleb Williams lineup.
Yeah.
All right, let's see here. We are going to wrap up here in a second. Any other thoughts on this slate? Anything that you had been tossing around that I didn't get a chance to ask you about?
No, I don't think so. I think we gave people what they wanted with this one.
Yes. Well, I wanted to make sure Britt couldn't make the show today. We're still trying to figure out kind of the best structure and the format for it. We could end on this. JB Yankees yelling at us in the chat. All caps here. What's your bold take of the day on Sunday, Yuda?
I thought I gave like 4 things.
You did that, but now he wants you to.
I need to put my stake my name to something.
That's right. Or I'll fall on the sword if it doesn't hit. Don't worry.
I think it's just like Cardinals Niners late game hammer over the Cowboys Bears.
I like it. It's certainly contrarian. I know, going through the slate, I was not gravitating there, but I do love that. Just even if you don't like it, if you are behind and you can't eat the chalk of that Cowboys game, it's such an easy pivot, like you said.
Yeah.
So
I guess do McBride and flex though, because you don't want to have to play a Bears Cowboys tight end.
That's true. Yeah, and actually, a lot of these top tight ends here are, or top lineups featuring McBride are McBride in the flex. There's a Fannin, a Juwan Johnson, a Dallas Goedert. So that's a good shout out to have that flexibility there. All right. Awesome stuff, guys. Appreciated the feedback from the first couple of shows. You guys can get 10% off any of these Run the Sims packages here if you guys want to get the Sim Runner Pro. Obviously, the diversification tool from Shady Advice that we showcased the previous couple of weeks. All kinds of stuff. I like checking out the prop tool as well for the underdog stuff, looking for mispriced lines over there when I'm building my pick'ems. That's promo code Pete for 10% off. Yuda, anything else here on the Run the Sims side before we get out of here?
All right, nope, we're all good.
All right, awesome. We'll probably get some other Run the Sims crew rolling through as well, along with Yuda. We can maybe get some nerdy, some shit my money in here. If you guys have any favorites, be sure to let us know in the comments. Otherwise, I'm going to pop over to do the show with Nez right now, off and on the clock, breaking down the underdog slate for week 3. You guys will be redirected here immediately as this ends. So I'll see you over there. Thank you to Yuda. Thank you to JM. Good luck in week 3, guys. We'll see you next week.